Today we're looking at Ezekiel chapters 41 to 48. I've spent 45 minutes of my life reading this, so you don't have to. There's not actually a huge amount in those chapters, so we're just going to quickly whiz through what's in there and then do a summary of the whole book of Ezekiel before we can then move on to the next one. As a reminder, Ezekiel was a prophet in the Old Testament. It's a bit weird. And the last video closed with he was having some sort of vision about a dude turning up. I think it was a bronze man, a bit strange, with a measuring stick, and he was measuring some sort of temple. This part then carries on. This guy's still measuring this temple, and it goes on for quite some way. And it occurred that there's enough information in here that you could actually probably construct it. So I went on the internet to actually look it up and find that actually someone has worked out what it would look like. So here it is. Interestingly though, despite the fact that there's enough information to do this, apparently no one has ever actually built this temple. So yeah, it seems to be alluding to some future thing. And it's slightly surprising that someone full of religious zeal hasn't built it at some point, but there we go. It talks at one point about, there's in the vision, the glory of God is seen turning up through the east gate. The glory of God we looked at previously, it was a messed up thing with animals with wings and many heads and wheels turning, and a dude sat on a cloud who was all bright and stuff. Maybe that's where the misrepresentation of God as a man sat on a cloud comes from, perhaps. But yeah, the glory of God turns up. Yeah, it's interesting. It's from the east, because I gather all churches in the west, at least, have the altar end points towards Jerusalem, hence east. But it's interesting that in a theoretical, future theological temple, that it would need to point east anyway. But yeah, there we go. Or it might be in Jerusalem. But God says anyway that he is basically wants this so the Israelites can live in it, and then he can live among them. It's quite a big temple, and it actually gets referred to as a city in some respects. But it's not that big. I mean, there's no way that actually that many people are getting in it. So there's clearly some sort of metaphorical thing going on. And God says that the city is going to be called The Lord is Here. It's not the catchiest name in English, but I assume it perhaps sounds better in Hebrew. It also has a lot of parallels with Leviticus, because if you recall back in Leviticus, there were all the directions about how to build the tabernacle and some extensive and specific instructions on how to do that. And then a load of detail for how the priests are to do things and conduct themselves and carry out sacrifices, that sort of thing. This is all in this again. Fortunately, much shorter this time. It's just as boring as Leviticus, but you know, there we go. There is an odd difference though, because this one makes reference to some prince. So yeah, that wasn't in Leviticus at all, and I guess the implication would be that the prince is supposed to be Jesus, perhaps. But it does seem very backward looking again, or it feels very Old Testament-y. I think that was the thing I found in the book of Isaiah. It got suddenly very forward looking. It started to feel less Old Testament, much more New Testament. But since Isaiah, everything has been a little bit more Old Testament-y feeling, and it's, I don't say disappointing, but it was refreshing to be looking forward, and this does seem to be looking back still. But yeah, that's basically, for my 45 minutes, that's all I got out of that one. Obviously, with the caveat that I realise I'm missing lots of stuff in all of these. So for the book of Ezekiel as a whole, I guess the key issue to come out of this is this whole Son of Man thing. And we have had a couple of mentions of Son of Man earlier in the Old Testament, but it's just rife throughout. In fact, I think there's more instances of it in the book of Ezekiel than there are in the New Testament, where Jesus is referred to as the Son of Man or a Son of Man. And I wonder if that's the distinction, because Son of Man just means human being. So is there a distinction in the fact that Ezekiel is a Son of Man and Jesus is going to be the Son of Man? I don't want to get ahead of ourselves or anything, obviously, but it's difficult to ignore. And I know already that Son of Man seems to be Jesus' favoured term for himself. I realise at some point we're going to have to properly tackle that, and like, what does it mean? But yeah, I'm just not going to do it yet, so never mind. I guess the whole Jesus idea, though, does tie to this reference to some prince in all the Levitical directions that we've encountered this time. But we also had the idea of this shepherd thing. So we got the sheep and shepherd metaphor, where there's going to be a shepherd come along and people are the sheep. And it talks about David is going to be the shepherd. David, the guy who's been dead for 400 years or whatever it is at this point. Probably a bit longer than that, actually. He's not here anyway. So that would suggest potentially it's getting a line of David, which said that Jesus was going to descend from the line of David. And then we've got the prince thing. So I guess that does sort of make some sense. I guess one of the problems, though, is because of the vagueness in which these visions are put forward. If two different prophets had the same vision, would they necessarily interpret it the same way? Which is an interesting one. So you're left with a lot of the prophet in what we're being told. And I guess there's a dangerous element to this too, actually, because you think if Christianity is true, then by definition it's sort of dangerous to not be a Christian. But the Jews are looking at this and going, oh no, this stuff it's pointing to wasn't fulfilled by Jesus. The Christians are looking at saying, yes, it was. And presumably the Muslims are looking at it saying that it's pointing to Muhammad. So I don't want to talk about God being irresponsible or anything. That just seems a tad too far. But that idea seems relevant. You could frame it in such a way that leaving that stuff out there in the world for people to misinterpret is really problematic. So, yeah, not quite sure what to do with that. But I guess there's an argument that if you really look into it hard enough, the answers should be there. But there are obviously some very learned scholars in Judaism and Islam. So, yeah, don't know. That was the book of Ezekiel anyway. Can't say I particularly enjoyed that one. That was, it's consistent with stuff and it's all pointing in the right direction, I guess. But yeah, some of these books are more enjoyable than others. We will move on anyway, and we've got another prophet to look at next, being Daniel. And yeah, we'll see what's in that.